as a young gay man in the 1980s, the world was or certainly the UK and the States was a much more hostile place to LGBT plus people than either country is now. Admittedly, some parts of the world, things have not improved in the way that they have here. And what it was like as a young scientist, and I'm talking about role models here, and it's interesting, I recently gave a talk on role models, and almost every person who was in this presentation as an ally was in that presentation as a role model. And I think that's, you know, it's not like I copied and pasted one presentation to the other. It's that, oh, actually the two things came together. And I think when we talk about role models, particularly in terms of diversity, we focus very much on I as a young person, and I'm looking for a senior person in the world of senior people who looks like I expect to look by the time I get to their age. And so, you know, me as a young gay man at that time looking for an older gay scientist as a role model. And actually these last few weeks, I've really moved away from that as the idea of what a role model is, because role models can be in all sorts of different guises. You don't just have to look for a future projection of yourself to find role models. And, you know, back in the 1980s, well, it turns out that was quite fortunate because there weren't any. There was genuinely no, we were in the days before social media, so it may be that there were people in their locale who were, you know, completely out confident senior gay scientists, but I didn't know about them because there was no way of knowing about them. And in, you know, my view, anywhere I could see, there just was nobody. And so it really felt like if I was to progress in this world, then I would have to forge my own way. But then, you know, when I think again, and I think about actually how I was helped, you know, what are the things that we want role models to do? We want role models to model behaviors that we would like to see. We want role models to teach us that there are good ways of being rather than poor ways of being. And, you know, we're looking to people who are going to help us. So they might be someone that you would call a mentor or a supporter, a champion, a helper, or indeed just a friend. And people who provide those things are actually, they're who the allies are. I don't view you know, groupings of people who are their primary relationship with me is actually ally. You know, they are a mentor, a supporter, a champion, a helper, a friend, and all of those people are allies. And so I'm just going to take you through some of the people who helped, and just to try and initiate a discussion. You know, there is not an hour's worth of presentation here. There's about 10, 15 minutes worth. And what I'm hoping is that we'll stimulate a discussion where you get to talk about allyship from your point of view, you know, perhaps about people who have helped you, but also about different ways in which you might help other people. I also want to point out that these people are not necessarily paragons of virtue, people who you should have up on some pedestal. They are often deeply flawed human beings, just like all of us are. And I'm going to start with one of those, and this is Ken Seddon, who was my PhD supervisor. And he was capable of being dismissive, rude, objectionable, but he absolutely believed that talent came in all guises, that talent wasn't white, it wasn't male, it wasn't straight, and had no truck for any other idea around that, and made it perfectly clear. And he was the leader of the ionic liquids field, absolutely the figure that was loomed largest in the field. And it had a really important impact on that field. When I go into the ionic liquids field, in which I still work, it is a very open, inclusive field within chemistry, both in its own absolute sense, but when I compare it to other conferences I go to and other groupings that I'm part of, it really is very much more open and inclusive than the others. And really, when I ask the question why, the answer is, well, the person who for 20 or 30 years was seen to be the leader of that field absolutely believed in his core that talent came in all guises. And it wasn't political correctness. He wasn't saying it because he was taking, in fact, he was very apolitical. He wasn't saying it because he was taking some stance. It was just what he believed. And I think that's the first place of allyship, isn't it? To believe that the people that you're allies with are every bit as good as you are. Now, Eddie was the person that I went to work with after my PhD at Sussex, and it was at the University of Exeter. And it was a temporary job called the Demonstrator in Inorganic Chemistry. And Eddie was chair of the interview board. We had a very conventional interview. And at the end of the interview, he said to me, if I were to offer you this job, would you take it? And I said, well, actually, I would like to bring my partner down to Exeter so we can have a little look around. But yes, I'm enthusiastic for this job. Eddie then went back to the department. And although he'd been very calm in his conversation with me, flew into a panic. And literally the next day was running around the department saying, I've just appointed a gay man. I've just appointed a gay man. What am I to do? And luckily, Julia, who had been a student with me at Sussex at the same time, calmed him down, gave him a cup of tea and said, Ed, you're being ridiculous. And why do I know this? Well, the reason I know this is because Ed told me. And at the end of this temporary position, he sat down with me and he said, I did this and I was ridiculous. And, what I have learned from you being here, from you doing your job on a day-to-day basis, you being around, is that I would be happy to appoint a gay person to any position I had available ever again. And so what did he do? He learned. He listened, he observed, he didn't apply prejudice. He observed and learned and changed his point of view. And I think that that's another thing that's important in allyship. Are you willing to listen to the experiences of the other person and change your point of view? Observe the other person and change your point of view. I think that that's an important part of it.